The fluorescent lights of the courtroom hummed, a dull counterpoint to the frantic thumping of my heart. My hands, clasped tightly in my lap, were slick with sweat. I could feel the weight of my dress uniform, the stiff fabric a stark contrast to the churning emotions inside me. Colonel Davis, Judge Thompson's voice echoed. Are you ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, I reply, my voice steadier than I felt. This courtroom, this lawsuit, it was the culmination of years of simmering resentment, of feeling like an outsider in my own family. Secrets, lies, and a wedding dress. That's what this was all about. My lawyer, Ms. Klein, a formidable woman with steel-grey eyes, squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. We've got this, Rachel. Across the aisle sat my sister, Diana, radiating an air of smug confidence. Her fiancé, Julian Thorne, the very reason we were here, sat beside her, his hand resting possessively on her knee. He flashed me a condescending smile. I forced myself not to react. This wasn't about him. Not entirely. This was about my family, about the years of subtle digs, the constant comparisons, the unwavering favoritism that had always been directed towards Diana. Colonel Davis, Judge Thompson continued, your lawsuit alleges that your sister, Ms. Diana Davis, and her fiancé, Mr. Julian Thorne, conspired to defraud you of your rightful inheritance. Can you elaborate on these allegations? I took a deep breath, the metallic tang of anxiety coating my tongue. Your Honor, my father, the late General William Davis, made it clear in his will that his estate, including his considerable business holdings, would be divided equally between his two daughters. My voice resonated in the hushed courtroom. However, shortly after his death, documents surfaced suggesting that my father had revised his will, leaving the majority of his assets to Diana. And you believe these documents to be fraudulent? The judge asked, his gaze sharp and unwavering. I do, Your Honor, I said firmly, meeting his gaze. My father was a man of meticulous detail, a stickler for protocol. He would never have altered such an important document without consulting his legal counsel, without informing me. Moreover, the signature on the revised will, I paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. It simply doesn't match his. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Diana shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her carefully composed facade beginning to crack. Julian, however, remained impassive, his expression unreadable. Ms. Klein stood up, a voice crisp and authoritative. Your Honor, we have expert testimony that will corroborate Colonel Davis's claims regarding the forged signature. We also have evidence suggesting that Mr. Thorne, using his position as vice president of a major defense contractor, unduly influenced General Davis in the months leading up to his death. Objection. Diana's lawyer, a slick, expensively dressed man named Mr. Caldwell, leapt to his feet. These are baseless accusations, Your Honor, with no supporting evidence. The evidence will be presented in due course, Mr. Caldwell, Judge Thompson replied sternly. Colonel Davis, please continue. I swallowed, the dryness in my throat making it difficult to speak. My father, he trusted Julian, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He believed him to be a man of integrity, a suitable partner for my sister. He had no idea. My voice trailed off. The memories of my father's unwavering faith in Julian, his blind spot for Diana, stinging like a fresh wound. Sister's wedding, more like a family betrayal. He had no idea what. Colonel Davis, Judge Thompson prompted gently. He had no idea that Julian was using him, manipulating him for his own financial gain. I finished, my voice trembling slightly. He had no idea that the man he welcomed into our family was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Julian's eyes finally flickered, a hint of anger flashing in their depths, but he quickly regained his composure, his expression settling back into its usual mask of indifference. "Your Honor," Ms. Klein interjected, sensing my distress. "We believe that Mr. Thorne's influence extended beyond financial matters. We have reason to believe he deliberately sowed discord within the Davis family, isolating Colonel Davis from her father in order to further his own agenda." This was it. The core of my case. The reason I was willing to air our dirty laundry in public. The reason I was willing to risk everything to expose the truth. "Colonel Davis," Judge Thompson said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "these are serious allegations. Do you have any concrete evidence to support these claims?" I nodded, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." I reached into my briefcase, my fingers brushing against the cool metal of the flash drive containing the evidence I had painstakingly gathered over the past few months. Evidence that would not only expose Julian's DC, but would also reveal the depth of my family's betrayal. "This," I said, holding up the flash drive, "contains recordings, emails, and financial documents that will prove everything I have said. It will prove that Julian Thorne is not who he claims to be, and it will prove that my sister, knowingly and willingly, participated in his scheme." The courtroom erupted in a cacophony of whispers. Diana's face, now devoid of all color, was a mask of shock and disbelief. Julian, however, finally lost his composure. He shot to his feet, his face contorted with rage. "This is outrageous," he shouted. "These are lies. She's trying to ruin us." "Order." Judge Thompson banged his gavel, silencing the commotion. He looked down at me, his expression inscrutable. "Colonel Davis," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I expect you to substantiate these claims. The court will reconvene tomorrow morning to review the evidence." He banged the gavel again. "Court is adjourned." As the courtroom emptied, I sat there, the weight of my accusations settling upon me. This was only the beginning. The war had just begun, and I was ready to fight. The courtroom air hung thick with anticipation, the silent hum vibrating beneath the fluorescent lights. I could practically taste the metallic tang of injustice on my tongue. My sister, Vivian, sat across the aisle, a picture of composed serenity in her pristine white suit, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair catching the light. It was a stark contrast to the churning storm brewing inside me. She traded family for fortune. Now, she paid the price. I muttered under my breath, my gaze fixed on the smug curve of her lips. Julian, her fiancé and the source of all this turmoil, sat beside her, his hand resting possessively on her knee. He looked like a shark circling its prey, his eyes cold and calculating. "Do you think they even realize what they've done?" I whispered to my lawyer. He just patted my hand, a silent reassurance that justice would be served. My mind, however, was already elsewhere, drifting back to a memory that cut just as deep as any betrayal. It was Christmas morning, the year I graduated from West Point. Snow fell softly outside, blanketing the world in a pristine layer of white. Inside, the house buzzed with the usual chaotic energy of Christmas morning. The scent of pine and cinnamon hung heavy in the air, mingling with the aroma of Mom's famous cinnamon rolls, fresh from the oven. "This is it," I thought, clutching the small, velvet box in my hand. "This is the year they finally see me. I'd dreamt of this moment for years, the moment I'd present my parents with my officer's insignia. A symbol of years of hard work, dedication, and sacrifice." Vivian, already showered with gifts from Julian, a diamond tennis bracelet, a designer handbag, the latest tech gadget, sat by the fire, unwrapping another extravagant present. It was a cashmere scarf, the color of a robin's egg. "Oh, Julian, it's beautiful," she exclaimed, draping it around her neck. He beamed, preening under her praise. "My parents," captivated by the spectacle of Vivian's opulent gifts, barely glanced my way. I waited patiently, my heart pounding in my chest, for a lull in the gift-giving frenzy. Finally, when the whirlwind seemed to die down, I cleared my throat. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice trembling slightly with nerves. "I have something for you." They looked up, their expressions vaguely distracted, as if interrupted from a more important task. "Oh, Rachel, that's lovely, dear," my mother said absently, her eyes already drifting back to Vivian's dazzling display. "It's my officer's insignia," I explained, holding out the velvet box. "I wanted to share this moment with you." My father took the box, opening it with a perfunctory nod. "Very nice, Rachel," he mumbled, his gaze flitting over the gleaming silver bars. He handed the box back to me without another word, his attention already drawn back to Julian, who was regaling them with stories of his latest business deal. A cold knot formed in my stomach. The insignia, the symbol of my proudest achievement, felt like a lead weight in my hand. This was the moment I'd envisioned for years, the moment of recognition, of pride, of shared joy. Instead, it was met with indifference, a casual dismissal that stung more than any outright criticism. Vivian, noticing my deflated expression, offered a patronizing smile. "That's nice, Rachel," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "But you know, Julian just secured a major contract with the Department of Defense. It's a huge deal." She turned back to her fiancé, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "Tell them about it, darling." Julian, ever the showman, launched into a lengthy and self-congratulatory monologue about his latest triumph, peppering his narrative with technical jargon and industry buzzwords. My parents listened intently, their faces alight with impressed smiles. I, on the other hand, felt like I was slowly disappearing, fading into the background of their opulent Christmas tableau. The rest of the morning passed in a similar vein. Vivian and Julian held court, basking in the glow of their combined success and affluence, while I sat quietly, nursing my wounded pride. The cinnamon rolls went cold, a festive music faded into the background, and the snow outside continued to fall, silently burying the world in a blanket of white indifference. That Christmas morning, the stark contrast between their adoration for Vivian and her fiancé, and their casual disregard for my accomplishments, solidified a bitter truth in my heart. They valued wealth and status above all else, even above the love and dedication of their own daughter. The injustice of it all burned within me, a slow, simmering resentment that would eventually erupt into the inferno that now consumed our family. Secrets, lies, and a wedding dress, I thought, the words echoing in the silence of the courtroom. This wasn't just about a lawsuit. It was about reclaiming my worth, about exposing the hypocrisy that had festered within our family for far too long. It was about finally having my voice heard, even if it meant tearing down everything they held dear. And as I looked across the aisle at Vivian and Julian, their smug smiles faltering under my unwavering gaze, I knew that this time, I wouldn't be silenced. The stale hospital air hung heavy, thick with the antiseptic smell that clung to everything. I sat perched on the edge of the stiff vinyl chair, the cheap plastic digging into my thighs. My father paced, his polished shoes squeaking rhythmically against the linoleum floor. He kept muttering under his breath, something about deadlines and contracts. He barely glanced at Mom, lying pale and gaunt in the hospital bed. "Dad," I started, my voice a little shaky, "don't you think you should sit down?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Can't, Rachel. Got a conference call in 15 minutes. Big deal, merger, can't miss it." Mum coughed weakly, a rattling sound that made my stomach clench. She opened her eyes, a flicker of awareness in their usually bright depths. "John," she whispered, her voice raspy. He stopped pacing and finally looked at her. Yes, Martha. He didn't approach the bed, still standing by the window, his gaze fixed on the cityscape beyond. Are you still going through with that investment? His sigh was loud, impatient. Martha, we talked about this. It's a sound investment, secure. Good for the family. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. This was the crux of it. The moment I'd been dreading. Dad, I interjected, my voice rising slightly. It's on the dine. They manufacture cluster munitions. It's unethical. He turned to me, his face a mask of irritation. Unethical? What do you know about business, Rachel? This is how the world works. This is how we secure our future, I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. What about Mom's future? Her treatment is expensive. We could use that money for her treatment is covered. He snapped, cutting me off. The insurance barely covers half. I argued, my frustration boiling over. We have to pay out of pocket for the experimental therapy. Dr. Lee said. He rolled his eyes. Dr. Lee also said it's a long shot. I'm not throwing good money after bad. Disinvestment. He gestured towards the window, towards the sprawling city that represented his ambition. This will set us up for life. Olivia's future. Your future. The mention of Olivia's name stung. Always Olivia. Everything was for Olivia. Olivia, the golden child. The one who never questioned his decisions. The one who always smiled and nodded and agreed with everything he said. My future, I scoffed. You think I care about money when Mom is lying here, fighting for her life? He finally approached the bed, his expression softening slightly as he took Mom's hand. Martha, honey, don't listen to Rachel. She doesn't understand these things. This is complicated. Mum looked from him to me, her eyes filled with a weary sadness. John, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please reconsider. For me, he squeezed her hand tightly. I'll think about it, he said. But his tone lacked conviction. I knew, deep down, that his mind was already made up. The lure of profit, the promise of a more secure future, especially Olivia's future, those were the things that truly mattered to him. Not Mom's health, not my concerns, not anything that didn't align with his own ambitions. The conference call reminder chimed on his phone. He patted Mom's hand again, a perfunctory gesture. I have to go, he said, his voice already shifting into its businesslike cadence. I'll be back later. He didn't look at me as he left, the squeak of his shoes fading down the sterile hallway. I sat there, watching Mom's chest rise and fall shallowly, the beeping of the machines filling the silence. The weight of his betrayal, the cold indifference to her suffering, settled on me like a shroud. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the glaring disparity in his affection. The way he prioritized Olivia's future over everything else. Even Mom's life. This wasn't just a family. It was a battlefield, and I was losing the war. This one incident, this seemingly small act of prioritizing profit over Mom's well-being, was a microcosm of our entire family dynamic. It was the clearest demonstration yet that his love, his care, his concern were conditional, distributed unevenly, weighted heavily in Olivia's favor. The hum of the machines seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of Mom's fragility, of the ticking clock, of the looming possibility of losing her. I sat there for a long time, the anger and hurt simmering beneath the surface, a slow burn that would eventually ignite into a raging inferno. This wasn't just about Mom's health anymore. This was about years of subtle slights, of blatant favoritism, of being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. This was about the slow, insidious erosion of my relationship with my father. A relationship that had once felt so strong, so secure. Some families are worth fighting for, others worth destroying. And in that sterile, antiseptic room, watching my mother struggle to breathe, I knew exactly which category mine fell into. This wasn't just a family feud. This was war, and I was going to win, no matter the cost. The image of him walking away, phone pressed to his ear, the city lights reflecting in his cold, uncaring eyes, that image would be seared into my memory, a constant reminder of what I was fighting for, of the justice I was determined to seek. This memory, this stark betrayal, fueled my resolve. It was the gasoline on the fire that had been smoldering within me for years. It solidified my determination to expose Julian and Olivia for who they truly were, to dismantle the carefully constructed facade of their perfect lives, brick by painful brick. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming my power, about exposing the truth that had been buried for so long. This was about justice. For myself. For Mom, for all the times I had been overlooked, dismissed, and disregarded. This was about showing them that I wouldn't be silenced, that I wouldn't be ignored, that I would fight for what was right, even if it meant tearing my family apart in the process. The air in the hospital room seemed to grow heavier, thicker, as the reality of the situation sunk in. The antiseptic smell, once a sterile backdrop, now felt suffocating, a symbol of the sickness that had permeated our family, a sickness far more insidious than any physical ailment. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. The fight had just begun. The courtroom air crackled with anticipation. I'd laid out my case, meticulous and damning. Julian Thorne, my sister's fiancé and the VP of Thorne Defense, wasn't the man he pretended to be. He'd used my family, exploited my father's military connections, to secure lucrative contracts. Some families are worth fighting for, others worth destroying. And Julian Thorne was about to learn which category mine fell into. Ms. Davis, Judge Mallory addressed me, her voice echoing in the hushed room. Do you have any further evidence to present? My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of excitement and nerves. This was it. The moment I'd been building towards. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly as I reached into my briefcase. I do. I withdrew a thick manila envelope, the contents heavy with the weight of Julian's deceit. My sister, Olivia Davis, sat beside him, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously between Julian and me. She hadn't spoken to me since the lawsuit began, the chasm between us widening with every revelation. This envelope, I continued, holding it aloft, contains irrefutable proof of Julian Thorne's fraudulent activities. I could feel Julian's gaze burning into me, a mixture of anger and fear swirling in his eyes. Objection. Olivia's lawyer, a slick, expensively dressed man named Mr. Henderson, practically leapt to his feet. This is clearly a last-minute attempt to smear my client's name. We've had no opportunity to review these so-called proofs. Judge Mallory looked at me, our expression neutral. Ms. Davis, can you explain the nature of this evidence? Certainly, Your Honor. I met her gaze directly. This envelope contains confidential documents outlining Julian Thorne's scheme to inflate the cost of military equipment sold to the government. It also includes sworn affidavits from former Thorne Defense employees who witnessed these activities firsthand. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Olivia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Julian's face had drained of all color. He whispered something to Mr. Henderson, who in turn began arguing vehemently with the judge. The tension in the room was palpable. I watched the scene unfold, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. This was just the beginning. Julian thought he could use my family and get away with it. He was wrong. Judge Mallory banged her gavel, restoring order. Mr. Henderson, I understand your concerns. However, Ms. Davis has presented compelling evidence that warrants further investigation. I will review these documents in chambers and make a ruling on their admissibility. She gestured for the bailiff to approach. He took the envelope from me, his movements precise and formal, as he carried it towards the judge's chambers. I could practically feel the shift in power in the room. Julian's arrogance had evaporated, replaced by palpable unease. The judge disappeared into her chambers, leaving a tense silence hanging in the air. Olivia turned to Julian, her voice low and urgent. "What is she talking about? What documents?" Julian shook his head, his eyes fixed on the closed door of the judge's chambers. He didn't answer her. He didn't need to. The fear etched on his face spoke volumes. My own mother, sitting a few rows behind me, leaned forward and hissed, "Rachel, what have you done? You're ruining your sister's life." Her words stung, and I refused to let them derail me. "I'm protecting our family, Mom," I replied quietly. "Something you should have done a long time ago," she recalled as if I'd slapped her. The whispers around us intensified. I ignored them. My focus was solely on the door to the judge's chambers. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second amplifying the tension in the room. Olivia and Julian sat huddled together, whispering frantically. Mr. Henderson paced back and forth, his face a mask of worrying. Finally, the door to the judge's chambers opened. Judge Mowry returned to the bench, the manila envelope in her hand. The courtroom fell silent, every eye fixed on her. "Having reviewed the evidence presented by Ms. Davis," she announced, her voice clear and resonant, "I find it to be both credible and highly relevant to this case. The documents will be admitted as evidence." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Julian's face crumpled. Olivia stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief and something else fear. Furthermore, Judge Mowry continued, her gaze sweeping over the room. "Given the gravity of these allegations, I'm issuing a subpoena for all financial records related to Thorn Defense contracts with the government. This case is adjourned until those records are produced and reviewed by the court." She banged her gavel. "Court is adjourned." Chaos erupted. Reporters swarmed the front of the room, their cameras flashing. Olivia and Julian were quickly ushered out a side door by Mr. Henderson, their faces grim and ashen. My mother rushed towards me, her expression a mixture of anger and confusion. "Rachel," she pleaded, "what have you done? You've destroyed everything." "No, Mom," I reply, my voice firm. "I'm just getting started." My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it, my heart skipping a beat. The message was short and to the point. "Meet me at the usual place. I have something you need to see." It was him, the anonymous source who had provided me with the documents, the one person who knew the full extent of Julian's corruption. I glanced back at the emptying courtroom, a sense of anticipation building within me. This was the twist, the moment that could change everything. The gavel slammed down, echoing in the hushed courtroom like a gunshot. "Order," the bailiff barked, though no one dared to speak. My heart hammered against my ribs. My palms, despite the cool air conditioning, were slick with sweat. I could barely tear my gaze away from the judge, his face creased with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. This was it, the culmination of months of planning, years of hurt. She traded family for fortune. Now, she paid the price. I thought, the words a mantra I'd repeated to myself countless times. In the matter of Davis versus Harding Industries, Judge Thompson began, his voice resonating with authority. "The court has reached a verdict." He paused, those few seconds stretching into an eternity. My lawyer, Ms. Klein, squeezed my hand reassuringly, but her own face was tight with anticipation. Across the aisle, Olivia and Julian sat stiffly, their faces pale. Olivia's meticulously applied makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes. Julian, usually so smug and self-assured, looked like a cornered animal. "Good. Let them stew. Let them feel the weight of their deceit." Judge Thompson cleared his throat. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Rachel Davis. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. I felt a surge of triumph, so potent it almost took my breath away. It was real. It was happening. I hadn't imagined it, based on the evidence presented. The judge continued. The court is convinced that Harding Industries, through the actions of its vice president, Julian Harding, engaged in fraudulent activities, including the misappropriation of government funds intended for Project Phoenix. He turned his gaze directly to Julian, his eyes like ice. Mr. Harding, your blatant disregard for ethical conduct and your exploitation of your position for personal gain are reprehensible. Julian's face crumpled. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Olivia reached for his hand, her own trembling. The court orders Harding Industries to pay restitution to the government in the amount of $20 million. $20 million. More than I'd ever dreamed of. But it wasn't about the money. It was about justice. It was about exposing the truth. Furthermore, the judge continued, his voice unwavering. Mr. Harding is sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Olivia let out a choke sob, burying her face in her hands. Julian stared straight ahead, his eyes vacant. The bailiff approached him, his hand resting on his holster. It was over. He was done. As for Ms. Olivia Davis, Judge Thompson said, his voice softening slightly, the court recognizes that you were not directly involved in the fraudulent activities. Your willful ignorance and complicity in concealing your fiancé's actions cannot be overlooked. He paused. The court orders the forfeiture of all assets acquired through ill-gotten gains, including the properties purchased with funds diverted from Project Phoenix. Olivia's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. The luxurious penthouse apartment, the sprawling vacation home, gone, all gone. Ms. Klein turned to me, a small smile playing on her lips. Congratulations, Rachel, she whispered. You did it. I nodded, still slightly dazed. It felt surreal, like a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. As the bailiffs led Julian away, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't the euphoric rush of victory I'd expected. It was something deeper, more profound, a sense of peace. I glanced at Olivia, her face streaked with tears, her body shaking with sobs. A flicker of something not quite pity, not quite sympathy ran through me. She had made her choices. She had chosen ambition and greed over family and loyalty, and now she was paying the price. Later, as I left the courthouse, blinking in the bright sunlight, Ms. Klein handed me a sealed envelope. This arrived for you this morning, she said. It was marked to be delivered after the verdict. I took the envelope, my fingers tracing the elegant script of the return address. It was from my grandmother, Eleanor Davis. My grandmother, who had passed away a year ago, leaving her entire estate to Olivia. Also, we thought. I tore open the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. Inside was a handwritten letter, the ink faded but still legible. My dearest Rachel, it began, I know you may be feeling hurt and betrayed by your sister and by me. But please know that I have always loved you deeply. I have always seen your strength, your integrity, your unwavering sense of justice. I know you will do great things in this world. I have made arrangements to ensure that my estate, including the family trust, will be transferred to you upon the conclusion of this legal matter. Olivia may have chosen a path of deceit and greed, but you, my dear, have always chosen the path of righteousness. And that, my darling, is a far greater inheritance. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the words on the page. I had been so focused on exposing Olivia's lies, on seeking revenge for the years of hurt and betrayal, that I had almost forgotten what truly mattered: family, loyalty, integrity. And in the end, those were the values that had prevailed. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. Revenge is a dish best served cold or at a wedding reception. It wasn't the wedding reception I had envisioned, but the sentiment remained. The chill of justice had finally been served.